what do I have that I can give to whoever's going to be in the audience tomorrow or today that can significantly help them with transformation? And like, that's it. If you have that, nobody cares about books and stuff like that. Like, do I have the goods to do that? Now, all the other stuff does help to get the Trojan horse pulled into the city. So I'm a real big proponent on figuring out and helping other people figure out, what's your Trojan horse, right? The way you get paid in business is really simple. What problem do you solve that's keeping the CEO up at night, right? And if you solve that problem, like you're never going to not have money, right? Like, and over the years, that's what I've tried to do. It's like solve that problem. And every time I would connect with the CEO and solve that problem, they're pulling that horse in.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Frankie Russo. Frankie is a serial entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, and a 2-time best-selling author. He is an entrepreneur with a proven track record of using innovative methods to unlock rapid growth and competitive advantage. He has led multiple companies to remarkable growth, landing on the Inc. 500,000 list 8 years in a row, including 60 times growth in 3 years of his tech company 360IA, leading to an acquisition by a Fortune 500 company. You can learn more about Frankie at frankierusso.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Frankie.
Frankie, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Hey, glad to be here, Jeff.
Yeah,
Glad
very excited. Britt Frank, who I met last year in Kansas City, introduced us.
Legend.
Yeah, legendary. And then you and I had a call in early December, and God, I'm just excited to talk to you. Like a serial entrepreneur, keynote speaker, 3-time or almost 3-time author. Loved your TEDx talk last year on AI and the workplace. Fantastic. And you had you've had a little shit going on in your life in your 20s, having unbelievable success, and then some challenges with addiction in a lot of different ways. So yeah, but let's start with, even though you're very transparent, been on various social media and your website and your blogs, but even people know you fairly well, Frankie. What would surprise them about you?
I'm way better at helping adults figure out how to make their 5-year-old inner self come out than I am helping my own 5, 6, 7-year-olds keep their weird. That might surprise them. My wife just gave a thumbs up. She's in the studio. So already she loves this podcast.
The cobblers.
Anytime we get in a fight now, by the way, that's what happens is like, things go sideways and she can't figure out what her next comeback's going to be. She's like, oh yeah, you're really loving your weird. I wish everybody out there that you're helping could see you now. I'm like, roll the tape, baby. Roll the tape.
The cobbler's children have no shoes. There you go.
That's it. Plumber's pipes are always leaky. And so, yeah, maybe they don't know that about me. They're probably about to start. That's been a thing lately. Because I'm trying to think like everything about my life is either in a book or a podcast or a video or a talk or something out there.
Right.
But that's one thing that like I'm starting to realize that's my new like own it, because it is way harder to keep the conditions that will allow a kid to continue to love their weird than it is to like help an adult return back to it, which is pretty wild because
Yeah.
for some adults, the trauma that they've been through and the heavy conditioning from the age of like 5, 6 up to adulthood, it's kind of a big deal to peel all that back, do the work to come back to that whole self.
Yeah.
So we're trying. We're not perfect. We got 6 kids,
Yeah.
which is not a surprising fact for most people because it's fairly known.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's on your website.
yeah, exactly. We don't hide that.
Yeah.
I think that vulnerability, authenticity, transparency is a really big deal. It's not something that I've always done.
Mhm.
It by any means, it's like the love your weird was not like something that I've always done. I kind of did the opposite for a while, which is hence why it's become like a really important calling for me because of what it's unlocked. So
Right.
there you go.
Yeah.
There's a long version of
Yeah,
something they may
I'm
not
sure we're
know.
going to talk about that a little later on too. Love your weird because I love the concept. And so, where did you grow up, Frankie? And what was fun for you growing up?
Yeah. Okay. So growing up, the first 5 years was in Louisiana, and what was fun for me is, anything related to cowboys or trying to invent something new. I was always trying to invent stuff. Wanted to be in space, like a lot of 5-year-old boys and gals. So that was big. Fun fact: I also was fascinated with the 1980s TV evangelists. And so all 4 of those are what I would usually kind of get inspired by as a young kid. We moved after at 5. We moved to Pittsburgh. So originally, my parents were in fashion retail, and they had this kind of conversion moment when I was 5 or 6, and decided to sell everything and get into what's called inner city mission work. And they went to Pittsburgh so they could kind of train up there with another organization that was doing it, and basically figure out how to start and run homeless shelters. So my childhood was doing that. We were in Pittsburgh till about 9 years old. People ask me all the time why I don't have a Louisiana accent. I assume that's why. I don't know. I think I go back and forth. Maybe it'd be better if I did have the accent, but I kind of glad I don't. And but we came back to Louisiana when I want to say 9, and started a homeless shelter here, and kind of been here ever since. There were a couple times when all my friends were moving away. Most people that have like aspirations. I was in a band for a while trying to do that. That was my first like it wasn't anti love your weird, but it was my first real like effort to be cool, like not try to be this guy that was always inventing stuff and kind of the weirdo. And so I was going to fit in with the music. And that did happen. That went on for probably 8 or 9 years until I, didn't want to starve to death. But I ended up, at first I stayed because my companies did really well here, and I was able to like create these international companies in an unsuspecting city, which allowed for it to be a lot more efficient. So I traveled a lot, which I still do. And then by the time I sold the companies, I had too many kids in the blended family, all in the same town, that I can't get away. So I think it's 10 years, 3 months, 2 days, and 4.5 hours, and then I'll be able to move again. I mean, who's counting really? But I've created an app for the countdown. So still here, but yeah, as a kid, like, I always liked anything that was related to, I've invented time machines and hoverboards and jetpacks and machines that go to the center of the earth and all kinds of stuff. Obviously none of them worked. Otherwise I'd be, on Rogan's podcast or some shit right now, but
There you go.
no offense to your podcast, amazing podcast.
Now, this is a big stepping stone. Joe and I'm like the minor league Joe Rogan podcast.
That's right.
So,
like I expect a call from Rogan probably a couple weeks after this releases.
So you talked a little bit about aspirations as a child. What was it? To be a TV evangelist like Billy Graham?
Okay,
or was it...
so what it was, not even as cool as big as Billy Graham. It was one of the like lower ones, like a Kenneth Copeland or something. But it wasn't. It was all 4. So basically, I was this kind of weird combination of TV evangelist, cowboy, inventor, astronaut. So there wasn't a specific job for those four things until now, which is the job I do now.
Yeah. Do you credit watching these TV evangelists as
To
a
my work
child
now.
that your keynote speaking? Because obviously it's all about
Uh,
public speaking.
yeah. So a little bit. I don't like borrow, like, I don't like hit anybody on the head and like make them fall down and stuff like that, but I'm working on that, like, a Jedi trick. Give it time. But no, a little bit, yes. Like there is something about it because it wasn't just like an evangelist; it was a TV evangelist, right? So I don't know why. These
Yeah.
things that spark you at 5, and this is part of my work now, is that there's an important factor about whatever was going on at 5. And ironically, most of us, whatever we're doing at 5, stopped because it's ridiculous or it's weird. Like wanting to
Yeah.
be a mermaid and a flying nun or a Barbie that races
Right.
cars or a Captain Underpants or a superhero, whatever the heck we were into, or a
Right.
New York Yankee.
Yeah.
Some people become those things, not so much a mermaid, I guess. I guess
Right.
in Vegas, put the tail
Yeah.
on. But at the end of the day, what you'll find is that most people trying to figure out who am I, or like what's my unique gift to the world, and they're confused about it. If you go back to before people started conditioning it out of you, when your mind still believed it was possible, which is somewhere around 5, 6 years old, there's a powerful thing there. And again, like that, I've done a lot of work myself, and then I've helped a lot of other people do the same. And we'll jump into that more, but it's hard for you to ask me about my childhood and not talk about that. But
Begs the question. And we talked about Seth Godin. I had him onto my podcast, and
yeah,
Seth will say that the education system in the U.S. is built for the industrial revolution, that
that's right.
the post World War II boom,
Mm-hmm.
where really they wanted workers to be compliant. And and I think part of it is that destroys the creativity, right? Because you're told to follow the
Absolutely.
rules.
Absolutely.
You can't, like, I don't know, I was a little bit of a joker, got good grades, but I had and and especially boys seem to be
Are you
more.
trying to say you were the bad kid in the class?
Well, I wasn't the bad kid. I was kind of the good kid that
You could go
did
both
bad
ways.
things.
Yeah, right. Aren't we all? I mean, nobody's really bad, right? You did
Right.
some bad things.
Yeah.
Don't be bad per
But
se.
and you're doing this podcast standing up, and I'm a little jealous of that. But that's the other thing that happens. We're
Well, don't say I didn't
sitting.
warn you.
Yeah, right. Well, sitting is the new heart disease, and it's terrible. The more I read on it, and I've been really reading up on it lately, and that's the other thing. You start sitting, from kindergarten through, the rest of your life, right? So it's
Yeah.
school, college, office, work, unless you're obviously.
And I wish I could tell you I'm standing because I'm worried about my heart. It's really the fact that, like, someone told me this years ago when I was training as a keynote speaker and things like that. And they said that they always stand for your meetings. And because it's what partly for me specifically is I don't give talks sitting down. And so when I'm presenting myself, everything I do now is a sum total towards the next talk. It's really the work I do is from that stage.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a podcast, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a conversation, whatever it is, like, the best way to present myself is as myself, and as you will receive it, and that will be standing up.
Right.
So it's an interesting kind of thing
Yeah.
of why I did it, but it works. And it's amazing because I never sat down well. Like, I sucked at school as far as
Right.
that goes. My mom would have to talk to the teachers and get them to give me permission to do certain things, like put my foot underneath one of my legs or tap my pencil. And this is, I didn't get diagnosed as any kind of like spectrum or autism or ADHD or anything like that, but I probably could qualify for 12 of those. Yeah, but whatever. And so, and I'm not on drugs anymore. Otherwise I would go ahead and just get the scripts. But, I think the biggest thing for me is that school, obviously Seth is dead on. I go even more specifically to the fact that our whole capitalistic culture, our whole culture in general, especially in America, is so much about what you can count or you can read, or you can see. And so the irony of like organizations and companies and things like that wanting to us to bring out this like whole other side of ourselves. It's like this like oxymoron type deal because I'm not sure they really want it out, right? Or would know
Right.
what to do if it was all out.
Right.
And but the fact is that one of the biggest things we lose at 5, because I mean, I don't know what you were into at 5. Well, what were you into at 5, Jeff? You tell me real quick. What were you into?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I
Like, what'd you
like,
play? What'd you play? You play
yeah, I love
baseball?
sports.
Okay. Which one was your
Football.
favorite back then when you were
Back
little?
then, God, 5 is kind of young, but I mean, I just play. I love the three major sports. Blue collar family. My, 2 bedroom. My,
And those are what? Baseball, basketball, and soccer? Just kidding. Football?
maybe today would be, but no. Well,
Maybe.
yeah, the
If it's
three
women.
major sports at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
And
did,
was there a team? What was the team? Was there a team you looked up to? Was there?
At that time, it eventually became the Yankees and Jets, which is
Yeah.
kind of odd. At that, with the time period I grew up, usually was Jets, Mets, because they both played in Shea Stadium at the time, and Yankees, Giants, because they both played at Yankee Stadium. So, so that was it from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, I got into reading. I really like to learn. And
Okay.
everybody has their story. My mom died the day before my 5th birthday. She had cancer,
Mm,
so,
wow.
5 is
Sorry.
kind of a hard
Yep.
age to remember for me. I remember going to kindergarten, and I was actually with my living with my grandparents at the time because my mom passed. I'll never forget my grandfather who was in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in Italy, still lived in Italy, but for some reason fought for the U.S. in World War One against his brothers who fought for Italy, so they were enemies. But anyhow, he brought me to kindergarten, and we had a morning kindergarten and afternoon, and he brought me in the morning, but I was signed up for the afternoon, I guess, so we had to go back.
Yeah. Well, it's
But
interesting that you mentioned that because so this is what I meant with it being hard for some people to do the work. And I'm sure that like you've probably done that at this point in your life. You kind of have to, you know, work through some of like, what was going on and all
sure,
that.
yeah,
You've done some of that work. And, the thing about it is it's powerful work. But it's that work, let's call it inner child work, if you will, or like 5-year-old Jeff work, the relationship with that to real work or corporate work or things like that, that's the part that started to fascinate me.
right,
And I started to like look at the power of that work at work, if you will. And it is harder work when something like that happens. Like if when something traumatic like losing your mother, which is maybe one of the worst traumas for a 5-year-old. I mean, that's fucking terrible. And I'm sorry that happened to you. Um, that's one of the harder parts. I always try to acknowledge this in my talks is that if it is difficult to remember some of those things that like some of us it's just conditioning from school or conditioning from bullies, that said like, that's weird. Stop trying to invent stuff. You're never going to do that. Like,
right,
why don't you just be normal like everybody else?
right,
Like the stuff I was told at 6 years old, right? But it wasn't the same as that losing my mom. And
right,
so I always like to honor the fact that like if it is difficult to try to go back there, and it's not even necessarily painful, but it's just like this blank spot. Our bodies are designed to protect us. A lot of people talk about the ego, and you think of it as a negative thing, like it's like, oh, ego means like you're prideful or you're boastful. And it can be, but ego is designed as a good thing it's basically there just to protect us from this pain so that we aren't just like an open wound all the time. It's just when we over index on the ego or don't like circle back that it can cause problems. And it
right,
can and most, if not always, it shows up subconsciously. So it's very difficult to identify, which is why I always like to draw it out in the work that I do, because I've realized like it's big, especially with like your individual contribution to the world and your purpose and what I call your weird.
right,
And we all have it. And sometimes the easiest way to start to figure out what is my weird or what is my unique thing is to go back to before we started getting conditioned.
right.
And So I always encourage people to do that. In pretty much all of my talks, by about 2/3 in, literally everybody's telling the stranger next to them what they were into at 5. And the room
Right.
just kind of lights up. And then I grab a mic and run around for 5 or 10 minutes and
Yeah.
then bring them home. But it's because that kid represents a really important part of what I call your genius. And being connected to that genius as an adult has some powerful consequences.
I love hearing people's kind of journey after college. So you graduated from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette,
Yeah.
business degree, focused majors in PR and marketing. Look like
Yeah.
what's your first job after college, and how did you get it?
First thing I did out of college was sell yellow page advertising,
Oh wow,
which, if you know anything about advertising, if TV is the lion and radio is the tiger and newspapers the bear, yellow pages is the neutral rat. And I did that for about 10 months. Keep in mind, I was still making most of my money from playing gigs at bars and playing cover songs and stuff like that, which had got me through college. And I was also
what were you, lead singer, guitarist? What was your
lead guitarist, lead guitarist.
all right, I see
Yeah,
that.
I can harmonize a bit. I couldn't carry a good lead
Yeah.
that was worth like standing out. So I was playing music. I also had kind of stumbled into, while I was in college, when I was 20, I was waiting tables like most college kids. And I always like really took that seriously. And I always said that my first book, which it's not, would be everything you need to learn, everything you need to know to be a millionaire, you can learn in a restaurant. Because in hindsight, most of the time, if you're going to be a millionaire and you're starting from nothing, you've got to sell somebody else's product and you've got to have some service component. And that's usually how you can get a startup company to become a millionaire with nothing. So anyway, that's basically the same as being a waiter. It's like you're not going to get paid just for showing up. It's performance based, and you're delivering and having to face customers with somebody else's product, the back of the
Mhm.
house. So I always really took pride in that, where most people see it as just a transitional job. I didn't stay in the restaurant business longer than 3 years because somebody that I was over delivering for at a table one night, who was the previous vice president of Fannie Mae, said, "You should come work for me and sell mortgages." And I was like, "I don't know what a mortgage is, but that sounds awesome." And if you do the math, this was the year 2000. Okay. Yeah. No, or 2001. And so it was the prime time. I didn't know this, but it was the beginning of the deregulation of the mortgage industry, which is a big part of my story, by the way. Not that I had anything to do with the deregulation, but the role that bottoming out from drugs and alcohol at the same time as a mortgage crisis, as a mortgage broker, played for me was interesting. And obviously that was a nice culmination. That's '08. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So fun fact, went to school just to check the box. I'm not the school type. It's kind of funny. I spoke at Yale last year, and I'm now going to be doing these courses with a company that partners with Harvard and all these different classes. But I feel like I'm the least qualified. If you're listening now, just ignore that part of the tape. But I think they want people that have done the real world experience, and this from work, is that 5 years of experience is worth any 4-year degree, no doubt, maybe even 12-year degree.
Right.
But like I never even cared. Like when I hired people, I could care less if you had the experience. And
Yeah.
I didn't even look to see if they had the GED. So anyway, I got to college, did the yellow page thing, and it was always bothered me because I could see there were these problems that were keeping these companies from growing, and I couldn't solve them with the product they had. So about 10 months into that, I was like, screw this. Advertising is bullshit. PR is bullshit. You could never make money with this. And I went all in on the mortgages. Well, fun fact, if you fast forward some more years and get to '08, whenever all that bottomed out for me, see what happened was, at the time of the mortgage deals, I'm in my 20s. I'm making a bunch of money, which in my town, like to make 30, 40 grand as a 23, 24-year-old was just like, you might as well be, Elon Musk or something. And I'm buying everybody drugs, and it's like I've got a sports car, and I'm like thinking everything I touch turns to gold. I didn't realize that like literally it deregulated the industry so far that like literally
Yeah.
anybody could get a house.
And you were making a little bit more than 30, 40,000, I believe, right?
Well, it depends what day it was. I mean, I was, whenever I was making, I was spending at least $5 grand more that month.
Oh, shit.
So, but I tried to just block that out, really focus on offense, not worry about the defense, So anyway, I was just out of control, and I'm thinking that all my friends came to work for me because it was like, this is amazing, what's happening? And I'm thinking, this is the American dream, right? We're getting everybody
Yeah.
houses, like
Wolf of
this is
Wall
this is
Street,
this
Boiler
is what it's all
Room.
about. Yeah, Lafayette, Wolf of Wall Street, no big deal. This is before all the movies came out, right? But again, I'm thinking this is beautiful, right? And obviously, we know how the mortgage crisis ended. I ended with it, and at the same time, like I had been lying for years with the first wife about drug use and all this other crap, and she found out, and so she left, and then the business fell apart, and took the dog, and it was just, it was. I got to this crossroad where I was like, honestly, I still didn't really believe I was a drug addict or alcoholic, but I didn't know what else to do, and so I was like, screw it, let me just try this for a little while, and the more I was in recovery, and the more stories I heard about other people's journey, the more I realized, well, holy crap, maybe I am one of these. And they told me something really important in rehab. They said, when you hear someone's story, like, because I always, raised homeless shelters and stuff, I just assumed that's what an alcoholic is, right? Sleeping under the bridge with a paper bag and stuff. And I wasn't doing that yet. I lost my sports car and family fell apart and some stuff. I'm not sleeping under a bridge yet. And they said yet. They said always add yet when you hear these stories where it's like you haven't done that drug, or you didn't live in a crack house for that long, or you didn't go to federal prison. Whatever it is, just add yet after it. And that was actually a pretty profound thing for me back then. And that's been almost 17 years. It'll be 17 years in April that I haven't drank or done drugs, which has had its own profound impact on me as an adult, because the reason I didn't follow in my parents' footsteps, like I skipped this on accident, but when I was 18, my dad got kicked out of his own mission, that he had built, because he didn't want to take government funding, and didn't, the board was sideways with him. And so we had been poor that whole time, and he had done this great mission, so it's for a good cause. But I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be poor, number one, anymore, because the anxiety that comes with that. And then two, I'm not going to do this mission thing, and then they're going to just kick me out down the road. Screw that. I'm never getting kicked out of my stuff, and I'm never going to be poor. And that's what started that journey that ended with the crash I just told you, which is what, luckily I did it fast. Like I failed really fast because I was 27 and I already like bottoming out. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because one of the things was that I had this situation with my brother a year before the bottom out. And because I thought everything turned to gold, my brother graduates from college. I walk into his thing, and he was in the arts program or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, this is nothing. I don't know what he's doing for college. There's no way he can do anything with this. And I walk into their senior projects, and it's a whole room of like companies they created and packaging and all this stuff. I'm like, what the hell? It's a bunch of kids that want to make 20 grand a year. And I'm looking at millions of dollars of opportunity here. And I'm like, you don't need to go work for an ad agency. Let's just start one. Not that I didn't know crap about it, but everything we touch turns to gold. So ipso facto, let's just do that. And obviously for that year, he just designed stuff for our company. But when it all went to shit, I was like, man, what did I do good that we could use? And the fact is, I wasn't a good CEO. I wasn't good at managing people. I wasn't good at business. I wasn't good at anything except for one thing, which was making people believe that we had a great company. And so we started a little company that was a make-believe company. And it was two goals. One was make the clients believe in our company. And then the second thing was to make the community believe in our clients' company. And that was it. We called it Potenza, which was Italian for power. And then that went on. Ironically, that was a marketing, advertising, branding company, which I had said, obviously, years before that there's no money in it. And it was BS. And that became the first of my Inc. 500 companies.
Yeah, I think the amazing part too for you that I find fascinating is just as we talked about when we first had a Zoom call back in December. I was in the mortgage business, 05 through 09.
That's right.
Yeah, so
I forgot about that, Jeff.
I saw that shit happening.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, and I was of Capital One Home Loans. They bought a small, probably 50-person loan consulting company. It was started by a local entrepreneur in Kansas City called eSmart Loans. Capital One bought us, and literally like the week I started, that's when it became Capital One Home Loans. And
Wow.
I saw all that shit happening, and I'm like, and I was a strategic corporate guy. Now I'm hawking mortgages on the phone, and you know how it is. It's every day is Groundhog Day. It's the same shit on the app, and the appraisals and their credit report, and they forget they have a lien on their property. So you just switch out the names, but all the problems are the same. And we were the
That's it.
good
The
guys.
stiffs. The
Yeah,
stiffs.
the steps. Yeah. Oh yeah, you had to do. We had two buildings where one where the underwriters were, and one, and so you had to do the walk of shame because we were correspondent lenders. So City Financial would come in,
Yeah.
RFC, Countrywide, all the
Yeah.
and you do the walk of shame across the parking lot because you had to go to the city, to beg to get the loan passed. But yeah, but yeah, you're in this crazy business right out of college, so nothing different,
Nothing.
besides being the lead guitarist, and
That's it. Yeah. I went lead
and
guitarist,
you're
waiter
crazy,
slash mortgage broker.
making crazy money, whatever crazy is, and
Yep.
in
I'm glad
Louisiana,
you
but
did.
pretty damn good money for a 23-year-old, whatever you
Oh
were.
yeah. It
And
was
then
definitely noticeable.
yeah, you hit rock bottom. You're hiring your friends. You hit rock bottom, drug, alcohol addiction, and you basically, it looks like you start a company. Maybe, I mean, it was the ad agency within your mortgage company, but you basically started this Potenza like right after all this shit happened and became
Okay,
an ad agency.
let me put it this way. So basically there was a night in '08, I don't remember when it was, where at night we literally just changed the sign.
Yeah,
And overnight it went from Russo consulting group or financial group or whatever for our banking thing and was Potenza.
yeah,
And it's kind of wild, but and we just kind of kept going like, yep, this is just the way it is. And the way the mortgage business was going was that's kind of how everything was. It just kind of disappeared. Like
yeah.
it was a world where everything just like, we had to, keep the files for however many years, you know what I mean? So we were still there, but it was just like there was
Right.
nothing. It just shut down like almost overnight where you just couldn't fund anything anymore, and you had, unless you want to become a credit union or have these like huge bonds, which you should have to be doing that type of work.
Right.
And we weren't set up for that. And ironically, like there's a scenario where maybe I could have,
Yeah.
if I had any idea what the heck was coming down the pipe or anything like that. And people would tell me stuff like that, that it was coming, but I just was like, yeah, I just didn't take it that seriously, or I
Right.
wasn't that worried about it.
Yeah.
And it seemed too big to fail,
Right.
hence all the movies.
And people's LinkedIn are sometimes, fairly accurate, sometimes really accurate, sometimes not. But I mean, like I count the number of companies that are still active, at least being present. You got 7, you got, 2 books, keynote speaking, you got your podcasts, your 3rd book's coming out. And you do these, training sessions for companies. Like, how do you keep it all going? And it's very diverse. You got voodoo growers, organic, grown cannabis that's been going on since about 2018.
Which I've never got to sample, obviously.
Well, yeah.
But they say it's good.
What's you're not on the QA team to test the product.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Well, that's good.
So, fun fact, Jeff, just so you know, like some of the people, I'm my role in the different companies, it varies. So, like with Voodoo Growers, I'm a private equity investor, right? So,
Right.
there's actually probably 21 companies not listed on there,
Right.
that I could list, but your fingers start hurting. And it's like, at the end of the day, the secret to it is that I only operate like as the main operator a few of those.
Right.
And so that's part of it. And I've always built companies that have synergy. So if I'm not operating it, that's the only time I'm going to invest in a company that doesn't have like a big synergy, like Voodoo
Yeah.
Growers or like Artist Tone Records. That type of stuff doesn't have big synergies. Besides that, my other company Potenza used to like support the marketing brand part of it. But I've found that like there's only really 2 ways to be involved in a company, and that is either all in or on the board as an advisor.
Right.
The in between, it doesn't work well, and you really got to have the right mix So I've got this company, Russo Capital. It's a private equity. And one of the things that's worked well for me over the last years is finding other funds that, you know, are really good at what they do. And like, I kind of just hitch my wagon with that instead of trying to be in the day to day, especially
Right.
now that like now, like really the main thing I'm doing is just, and you have to go all in on that. Like
Yeah.
to really break through because speaking, it's somewhere in between trying to become a rock star and being a missionary. Is basically the best way I could describe trying to be a professional keynote speaker. And the missionary part is that you got to be super sold out to your calling because there's a lot better ways to make money. And you can make a bunch of money, but it's not the business you get into to try to make a bunch of money. It worked out for me because I'd already sold my company, my main big companies. So I've wound down 360IA and Potenza quite a bit after doing the sale back to in 2021. So again, some of it like is really manageable, but during the heyday, I was running all those at the same time. Like I've
Right.
scaled some of that back and it you got to learn how to build teams and delegate, and I've had to learn all that the hard way and build cultures of empowerment. And for better or for worse, I did do that.
Yeah.
I let people run with stuff and um, stayed way out front on the vision and ideas and things like that and motivation. So a lot of the stuff I do now for other companies, I was doing for my own company.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
You know, I interview on the podcast a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, and
Yeah.
I always ask kind of what is your, biggest learning, like what, the thing you did that like, oh shit. And I know you don't believe in failure, failures, you have to fail to grow and learn and innovate, right? But what,
Yeah.
but what one thing or two things that you did and you went, holy shit, I learned a lot from that.
Yeah. Well, first off, the story I've been telling you about the mortgage thing was was huge. I learned a lot from that one. So that was a big one and it was early. So it set me up with a real advantage. So I learned really early on how valuable failure was. Now, failure is not comfortable. You don't get any more comfortable with failure. You just realize quicker, um, near real time, but not too near real time, that like the gift that it is. But it sucks. It's super uncomfortable because it usually failure in business usually is tied to revenue and money. Apps being absent is painful when you're
Yeah.
at the helm. It's painful.
Right.
And so the thing about it though is that like the biggest lessons I've learned is when it was painful. And so obviously it was really painful when I had to shut the company down. And then different moments where I had to do things that didn't make sense on paper, meaning like step out and buy a software company when I didn't have any backers and go to India and start a company there when it never even been to India, or try to like hire the amount of people we need even though it at the time didn't make sense on paper, but then it made sense because we created the capacity to be able to take on the growth. So I mean there's a lot of lessons. I mean, I don't the main lesson is that like what looks like failure today, what looks like painful, should not be ignored. It's not ignored. It's not even endured. It's like embraced. And it started off as a big thing, like, oh, there's no more company. Okay. So I haven't had any failure like that one again. So then the next failure is like, this is just like, there's no more capacity. And that failure, like, let's just take 2011, 2012 in the agency, we grew 600%. I thought that was unbelievable. We made the Inc. 500 list for the first time. And I thought this was a one-time fluke. And because we just kept hitting capacity, it's like, I don't know how we can keep growing like this. Well, that capacity, that ceiling that we were hitting in 2011, 2012 is what forced me to be like, to do something that I thought was insane at the time, which was get into software technology, which I knew nothing about.
Right.
But I knew we had to solve the problem, and I didn't see a software that could do it. And this is before you had a lot of APIs and dashboards. Like today, everybody's got a dashboard, right? But in
Right.
2011, you didn't, especially if you were a local company. And so I was able to create a dashboard that facilitated automated reporting for like how you're like taking the guesswork out of what's working in marketing, which is this ambiguous game to begin with, and start to bring that into like focus and start figuring out what is the ROI, because we were getting millions of dollars in revenue from advertising, right? And so when you get somebody pays you $500,000 in 1 month, and it's one client, and they're a local client, like, and it's a shitty month, it's pretty awkward. Down here in the South, we actually coined it the donkey barbecue, which I haven't talked about in a while on a podcast, but the donkey barbecue. And the thing is that was when, like, you had these organizations, they had a crappy month. They looked internally, their team did everything right. They looked at their inventory, everything did right. And automotive was famous for this, right? And so then there was only one logical answer, and that's that the advertising and marketing crew screwed it up. So let's get them in here and let's get this donkey barbecue started. And you can only go through so many donkey barbecues before you're like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Like, yeah, I get it. Failure is part of the process, but like, come on, man. You only want to get kicked in the teeth so many times before you do something different. And I did something crazy and got into software before everybody else did. And it wasn't way before. By 2015, a lot of people were thinking about software.
Right.
I was always about just 12 to 18 months, every once in a while, 24 months ahead of the curve. And that's all it took.
Yeah.
But it was wild because I'd never had investors, right? I bought a company before I ever sold a company, and I didn't barely know what I was doing, but I knew enough to like figure it out. And I just kept figuring it out. And I had, I guess I'm a little bit crazier than most. I think it's to be a great entrepreneur, you have to have some screws loose. I'll be honest. I figured that out later, but yeah, you follow the pain. And because if I'm solving the pain for myself, the chances are there's a bunch of other people having the same pain, right? If I'm solving a problem that I can't solve, if I solve it, probably that's going to be valuable to some other people too. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm trying to figure out how to survive as a marketing and advertising firm and super serve the automotive industry. And then simultaneously, I had started working in the broadcast industry, whose most important client happens to be the automotive industry. Okay.
Right.
So fun fact. So all of it's kind of culminated at the same time. And I wasn't going to be able to break in cold turkey into the automotive industry. So what happened was I found this other industry, which my mentor is the chairman of Cox Media Group, Steve Pruitt, got a new book coming out, actually called The Gain Principle. And I met him in 2010 and didn't know it at the time, but he became like a pretty critical role for me because he saw that I was in the dirt, constantly trying to figure out these problems. And when you're in the ivory tower, that information is very valuable, especially if you're building solutions that the ivory tower can use. And so fast forward, the broadcast industry, the spots and stuff starts to become less effective, right? But 30% of most automotive broadcast companies in America, TV stations, 33% is from car dealers. And not that that's like some big secret. If you just turn your TV on over the years, you could tell
Right.
they're buying it on. Then you got personal injury and whatever else. But so anyway, it can't go away. So what happened is I went to the broadcast industry and let them white label and distribute the software I built for automotive. And then eventually became what I call the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. And fast forward, after they realized how big it became, this $100 million business for the broadcast people. And so they were like, man, well, this is too big. We need to bring this in-house. So they tried to reverse engineer it 3 or 4 times. And after failing, that's who bought my company in 2021.
Wow. It's amazing.
There's the short story. It all started with a donkey. It all started with a donkey
Donkey
barbecue.
bark. There you go. Love it. Love
Yeah,
it.
buddy.
Oh God. I mean, what do you attribute you were kind of, whether it was luck or whatever, but kind of being always at that 18 to 24 month ahead of the curve? Any advice there or just?
Yeah. So that's an easy one. So basically, I never tried to be ahead of the curve. So like, let's say the curve right now is OpenAI
Hmm.
or NVIDIA. All right. They're
Yeah.
like, they're the searing curve or like SpaceX. I don't know. So I never tried that. What I looked for was gaps between that and what's happening with this, what we call SMBs, small and medium businesses. So there's, I looked at what are like the most powerful SMBs. Again, automotive dealers are one of the most valuable small and medium businesses that you can find. Let's call them local businesses, right? And then you have this local TV stations. All their clients were SMBs. Okay, so I'll give you an example. 2011 or maybe 12, I don't know. Me and my mentor Steve Pruitt, he would always bring me into these like random meetings that like I had no idea what they were. And it wasn't until years later that I started to piece together like what he was teaching me in real time about like the real world of like private equity, venture capitalists in America. But we found ourselves in the Empire State Building. And that meeting was with a company called Crux. You ever heard of them?
Not. There's a Crux in Kansas City, but
No,
I'm
no, no,
thinking
no.
it's not this one.
No, so company, you never even heard of them, right? Sold for
Yeah.
almost $1 billion to Salesforce.
Okay.
Okay. No big deal, right?
No.
And
Okay.
anyway, I find myself in Crux and I'm looking around. This is actually why my office got a lot cooler after that day because like, they're riding around in skateboards, there's kegs and ping pong tables. And I came home and made the coolest office that Lafayette had ever seen, which was great. But that wasn't the real magic of that meeting. So that was the first time they introduced this concept to me called a DMP. It was just a data management platform, just another one of the million acronyms out there. But
Mhm.
what it was basically a way to say like, okay, Jeff, this is Jeff. And over here, this identifier number is Jeff's Netflix. And down here is Jeff's Twitter. And this is Jeff's TV. And this is right. So this footprint. And they were like, we know how to find all of that. And I was like, well, wait a second. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're telling me that you can distribute unique content to Jeff based on all of his digital footprint and then circle that back. So my brain started to explode. That day, I saw the architecture for what became the product we sold for our big exit
Right.
and what drove the 60x growth for 360IA. Because that day I asked them, I said, well, what about local companies? He said, oh, no one local has this. No, none of them could afford it. This is that doesn't even exist local. And that was an example of a moment where I was like, cool, I'm 18 to 24 months ahead of local. That I
Right.
could pull off. I
Right.
wasn't going to beat SpaceX to Mars,
Right.
right? But if there's something about SpaceX that is going to be relevant to local and I can build a software and become the translator of what's coming down. Because again, '08, some things worked in my favor in '08. So everything's going to crap in the mortgage business, but also cash for clunkers in the automotive and everything else went down. So for the first time, these like older CEOs and founders of companies are questioning their buddy who's been doing this like old school 1980s advertising marketing. So we walked in at a time when Facebook, Google, that type of stuff wasn't local yet, but then said we would also do their traditional media. And
Right.
the hybrid of both of those was what made Potenza so unique. Now, but
Right.
it hit a wall because it was still done by hand. So 360IA was born out of the pain of Potenza, which 360IA was the software I was describing.
Right. Wow. Love it.
Mhm.
Love it. So at what point, Frankie, did you decide, hey, I'd love to be a keynote speaker and I want to write a book? Like what was the kind of evolution of that thinking process?
So that was happening in parallel to all this. So I think 2014 was when I realized I could write a book while running my companies, and it was when somebody introduced the concept of a ghostwriter. I always walked Barnes and Nobles and like just loved the books. I was always kind of a fanboy of all the covers and just that thing, right? And then of course, when I started going to Inc. 500 conferences, I was look up at these stages and be like, man, this was like the rock stars of business and music background, wanted to be a TV evangelist, go where no man's gone before. I was like, that's it. And so 2014, I started writing my first book. It took me 2 years to get it out because I just wasn't ready for it. And I went through a couple of ghostwriters and, the first book, The Art of Why, which is a terrible book, by the way.
Jeez.
If it didn't allow for me to have 2 bestsellers, I would have scorched the earth with it and just be one. But my mentor always tells me, don't drive the Model T into the ditch, because you never know when you're going to need it. But yeah, I always like to laugh by that. And they told me don't write a book till you're 40, and of course I didn't listen to that like any other suggestion I've ever gotten. But I did, and like everything else, it was a catalyst. And so I started speaking around that time in 2014, and had some cool opportunities. Like I spoke for Apple and different things, and a lot of it was more from like the branding and customer experience type world than it was what eventually became like talking about purpose and passion. And then once I sold the company, I really started to hone in and realize, okay, what I really need to be talking about is how do you unlock growth, especially when you're in what I call a stagnation spiral. And that's the work I do now. And ironically, there's this intersection between business growth and loving your weird. And that's my signature, is really coming into organizations and showing them just how important it is to have a loop of that can allow for continuous growth. I call it the infinity growth loop, but that can only be fueled. And so many of these other frameworks you've seen on growth, they're underestimating the power source needed to fuel these frameworks and loops continuously. Because if you do this continuously, you're going to create inflection points and continuously have innovation. You're going to have growth, and you're going to continually have this competitive advantage. Okay, the things that are some of the fuel for growth itself. But the thing that I started to realize is that there was this missing piece, and that is like creating a culture where everyone's genius can come out. All right, and there's probably no scenario where we have enough time to cover all of this in one podcast, but I'll try to cover some of it. Essentially, I had another bottom about 7-8 years ago, went through a divorce. And that's actually where the Love Your Weird came into focus. I didn't start talking about it publicly for 5 years, but I did start really changing the way that I show up, because I realized for years I'd lived in this inauthentic existence, and I was just checking boxes in pretenses, which, a lot of us fall into that. I got married at 18 because, again, remember, they were running a mission, which means it was a religious background. So you get married super young, which is a total setup. So by 35, it's 2 different people. I've been living 2 lives for God knows how long, and I didn't love my weird. And that took a toll. Again, never think that like divorce could make you a better father and change your life for the better when you're going through it, because you wouldn't want the emotions to be on your worst enemy. But hindsight, you blended family. You've been through some of that.
Yeah,
you start
100%,
to realize the value of like, dude, like you get to a point, and I tell people this all the time now. It's like you never meet an old person that gives a shit about what people think about them. 85, 90, they don't give a shit,
Right.
And I think the game, or the opportunity is, can I get to that same mentality at 40? Because old people are loving. They're not mean about it, but like they're not worried about if you think that their clothes looks good, or if they're going to be themselves. Like, and most people's regrets at the end of life is that, obviously after you get past, like, I wish I'd have spent more time with my family, is like, I wish I'd have been myself. Like, I wish I wouldn't have tried to please so many other people. And so what's the power of doing that now? And I did that. I burnt the pedestal that I had created. I just released a book called The Art of Why, Master Your Purpose, and then had a crazy divorce. You know what I'm saying? It's like classic Frank move, right? Everything you touch turns to gold. So the only difference nowadays is I'm just like, I just know that like it ain't gold. I don't know what it is, but it ain't gold. Keep mining. And that's been a good motto for the most part. But the thing is that in all of these things, I started to realize that like, okay, this has been massive for me, because what I did is I went back to what was I into at 5. Like yeah, today I can rattle it off, right? Cowboy, TV evangelist, astronaut, inventor. I didn't know that shit 8 years ago. I mean, I
Right.
did, but I had to do a lot of work, write letters
Yeah.
to my 6-year-old self, do week-long like retreats without my phone or being able to say what I do for a living to strip all that back. Don't think there
Right.
wasn't a ton of work. And this is after having already um, been sober at that point 9 years or so.
Right.
So it's not like I had done no work. Um, but once I started plugging this in and letting my company love their weird, and you combine that with this like what eventually became like machine learning and early AI, the tech graduated from what I originally told you.
Right.
It became a piece of tech that actually could predict who was going to buy a car within 3 months before they start shopping
Right.
in any neighborhood in America. So it became quite sophisticated, but part of that was this culture where everybody felt like they could be a part of it, and they all were. And during that time, in 3 years, we had 60x growth, which is unheard of. And we sold the company the next year.
Wow.
But the love your weird piece and the creating a culture where that was possible, that was a big part of it. And so that now what I do is help other organizations create that same type of culture that can unlock that type of growth.
Yeah. That's just so interesting. I want to go back to the speaking. So you're writing a book in 2014. I think you said you
Yeah.
got about that same time you're getting into the, speaking. But, without the book, I mean, obviously you're such a successful entrepreneur, founder of companies and all that. But was it easy getting speaking gigs without a book? And because you never spoke before for pay, I
No.
guess.
Yeah. So the thing is, you don't have to have a book to get speaking gigs. I actually did it opposite. Like I had the books way before I was serious about speaking.
Right.
So like up until I sold the company, I might speak 5 to 10 times a year. And a lot of those are like industry specific type talks. And so I didn't really get serious about it until I could go full time. But by the time I went full time, I actually had already had 2 of these books out and knew how to create the book piece. I was over indexing on the book piece. And if you've ever written a nonfiction book, um, the money is not in the book, right? You
Right.
can make some, but it's just like the music business. Unless you're freaking
Yeah.
Taylor Swift, and
Yeah.
even if you are Taylor Swift, like, or let's say unless you get your song on like a bunch of movies and Grey's Anatomy, okay, you got to go on tour to make money.
Right.
And so I put together some years back that like that's the tour, and the tour is keynote speaking. So like it's be an author, but like I flipped it upside down. Instead of becoming an author that speaks, I was someone who speaks that happens to be an author. Like so, everything
Right.
I do, all facilitates that one platform and stage, which is the keynote stage. I do other things, advising, master classes, books, podcasts, social media content, write articles, but all of it, I became about one thing, which was the work that I do from that stage. And it's a different game. You don't have to be it. I know a lot of really successful speakers, professional keynotes that they don't even have a book,
Right.
So the book is the less important. And then a lot of people like for example, my book, like my next book is way more like in the pocket on like the work that I'm doing now and stuff like that. But it's you start to realize once you have it, like once you've got a TED Talk, you got books, you have all this stuff. It's good. And some days, what do I know? Maybe it's important. I don't know. Most days I look at the stuff that I've accomplished. I'm like, it's all about one thing, and it's not the accomplishments.
Right.
It's about what do I have that I can give to whoever's going to be in the audience tomorrow or today that can significantly help them with transformation. And like that's it. If you have that, nobody cares about books and stuff like that. Like, do I have the goods to do that? Now, all the other stuff does help to get the Trojan horse pulled into the city. So I'm a real big proponent on figuring out and helping other people figure out, what's your Trojan horse, right? The way you get paid in business is really simple. What problem do you solve that's keeping the CEO up at night, right? And if you solve that problem, like you're never going to not have money, right? Like, and over the years, that's what I've tried to do. It's like solve that problem. And every time I would connect with the CEO and solve that problem, they're pulling that horse in. How it works and all the like insides of it. That's why like I don't even people know love your weird about me just because it's so jarring to talk about weird at work.
Right.
But besides that, I don't really talk about it. I got the podcast, got a t-shirt. People know it's a slogan. It's a bumper sticker. But
Right.
like nobody calls me because they're for love your weird. Not really. They're calling me because they know that I'm an expert at helping unlock growth. I've done it in
Right.
multiple industries with America's fast growing companies, yada, yada, yada. Right. the Trojan horse doesn't say weird, it says growth. So of course you're
Right.
going to pull that in because everybody knows that you have revenue growth that forgives a multitude of other sins.
Right.
Okay. Who are we kidding here? So yeah, pulling the horse in. They don't know until the horse is in and they're asleep that there's a bunch of weird Oompa Loompas that are about to come out and take the whole city.
Right.
But by that time, you already got the horse in, man.
Right. Right. No, I love it. Love it.
And that's what I do for my keynote in a nutshell. It's like, by the
Yeah.
time you're in there, you know.
No, I
let's
love
do
it. I I loved your 2024 TEDx talk on kind of the future of work and AI, and the common thought is like AI is going to replace humans at work and things like that. But talk about your thoughts there because I really love them.
I had this interesting experience where, so I was in tech, so I've always loved inventions and all of that. And it was tech's one of those things, or AI feels like kind of like black magic until you kind of figure it out. And it was black magic for me for a while. And it allowed for me as an adult to finally invent something that worked. So I've always had this special, like kind of like magical relationship with tech. I'm not as disillusioned as I used to be. But I met a guy 3 years ago. He became a partner actually in one of our companies. Now that I mention it, I don't know if it's even listed on there, but there's a company that I co-founded called Origin AI, and it's a consultancy. And we've also just recently put out a TV show on PBS called AI Into the Black Box. I met him, and he's been a futurist for a long time. He calls himself a frontier futurist, so he's like very kind of practical about it. But he owns a robotics company, so I kind of come from the software background. He comes from the hardware, and I've done. He and I have done a. I mean, we're constantly looking at it, talking about it. But he kind of helped me stretch my brain all the way to the like end of where this looks like, where the machine, the tech, the software is all ironed out. It's like right now, anything you're going to throw shade on AI, it's like, oh, it's not as creative as this, or I still got to check that, or still needs a human to do. That's going to end. Like eventually, the robots will be good enough to hammer the house, if you're even hammering it versus printing it, or the robots will be good enough to do your dishes better than you, or to do your job. Like fast forward to that, he helped me go there, and it's a very, very daunting thing to do, right? Don't go there if you're like having a depressing day by any means. But I went there and it was like, what's left? And a lot of the work that I've done since then is like help become a translator of like, what should we do today in preparation for a future where we don't get left behind, which is the slogan for Origin AI, is like creating a future where no one gets left behind. So ironically, like I don't think of myself as an AI expert because I think it's ridiculous, unless maybe you're Sam Altman, to say you're an AI expert right now, because I don't even think we've had enough time to qualify in the nature of how we've always qualified experts out of time. It is the Wild West right now, but that's going to shift and change. So the biggest thing is that I started doing a lot of research and looking at this, and that's what the TED Talk was about. It was like, what do we do? What should we do? And the answer to what we should do about AI is the same answer to what we should do as humans. It's like, if I'm worried about AI taking my job, then maybe I'm doing the wrong damn job. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I got to ask myself the right question, which is that. And at the end of the day, it's like, also, what do I offer to this world that's uniquely mine? See, one of the things that people don't know about weird, and I actually found this out after I started promoting Love Your Weird. My wife and I found, like, by accident, that the word weird didn't mean what we thought. See, I was trying to say, hey, love your weird, like, this negative thing, the things that are your quirks or odd or that people don't necessarily approve of. But that's only the first layer. At the heart of this, and why it's taken full hold as my mission, is that the original word weird was spelled differently. Did I tell you this already?
You didn't, but I did look
But
it
you
up.
watched the TED Talk.
Yeah,
All right,
I watched the TED
I'll give
Talk.
everybody the cheat sheet. Yeah, so you know this. So
Yeah.
it was spelled WYRD.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this either until I did this work, just how influential Shakespeare was on translating Old English to what it is today. And like the role he played on establishing the value or the meaning of the words. And it was him who, with his weird sisters, that kind of started to twist it, where it became this kind of negative villain thing that you didn't really want to be. Weird became bad. But before that, the word weird wasn't just spelled differently, it had a very different meaning, which was the power to control or influence your fate, destiny, And the one that really sticks out for me, your supernatural quality. In other words, your genius. Like each one of us has that. Now, part of the work that I do is helping people figure out what the hell is that for me if you don't know what it is. Some people, they're not sure. Like, do I have that? I mean, and how do I find it? Which is why I always say, hey, let's start by going back to the earliest imprint that you can remember before the world or life started conditioning it out of you. Let's start there, which usually 5-6 years old, right? Before the conditioning that Godin talks about, like school, kicks in and starts the decay of our divergent thinking that is innate. That's why I always say, imagination and creativity and these things are not learned; they're unlearned.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love the kind of the supernatural quality in each of us, the genius. It's beautiful, it really is. Frank, I love to ask two questions of great leaders and thought leaders like yourself. One is to that recent college graduate when they're getting out of school and they're trying to navigate their first job search and start their professional career. What advice do you have for that group?
Yeah. So if you're getting out early, first off, just try some stuff. I mean, I don't expect to understand where your life's going to be. Because if you're anything like me, you're playing guitar for a band while also trying to close mortgages from the tour van, while also thinking, did you make a mistake by quitting the Nutri-Rat yellow paper job? In the as the internet is rising and crushing yellow papers. So
Right.
what do you know? First of all, you don't know anything. So just get out there and like do some shit. Okay. Start. Like just try some stuff and keep your eyes open. Like when you fail, like figure out what your part was. Don't just blame the economy or the president or the political stuff or your mom or your dad. Like what was your part in it? Like I didn't take down the mortgage crisis all in, but there was tons of stuff I could have done differently in preparation for that. Learn from it. Look at it. Like always be looking at like, what's my part? And then leave the rest. But like your part, that's the answer. That's how we get better. And as you get better and you, what I call don't flinch, don't flinch. That doesn't mean you don't switch industries, you don't switch things, but you don't give up. And so the main thing I would tell kids is like, get started, fuck some shit up and don't flinch.
Yeah, no, I love that. And once you start your career, most people are an individual contributor, but those that want to become a leader and be a leader that has a group of people on the org chart that you're responsible for, because obviously everyone can be a leader. What advice do you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
So are you asking me like if it's a key contributor or someone that's kind of in the middle of an org chart trying to like figure out?
Yeah, no direct reports. So once you get direct reports and you want to do that, and you're the first time manager, what advice do you have for them?
There you go.
Yeah.
Same thing. Start, fuck some shit up, and don't flinch. No. It's so the main thing about that role is that no matter how you split it, you got two masters. You've got the big boss above you, and you have your customer. And then you are the master of the people below you, okay? Or they are the master. But either way, you can see things that the big boss can't. And so the most important thing to recognize in that role is that you're a translator, and it's not the same language. The individual and key contributors at the bottom do not speak the same language as the ivory tower or the top, not anymore. And when the person at the top was at the bottom, it was a different language. So they think that the key contributors, individual contributors are still speaking that language, but you know that they aren't. And so the idea is not to get the big boss to speak their language. It's for you to translate the key contributors and the truth to the big boss in a language that is native to them. And what that means is, let's say you want to innovate and you keep bringing your own ideas and they keep getting shot down. Next time, look at what is the pet project or the project that the big boss cares about and figure out how you could add value and innovate on that first. Earn the trust, create the traction, and then you can come back around and bring some idea that you believe and might be right could change everything about the competitive advantage and growth trajectory of the company. But you have not earned that yet. And so the way that you earn that is by serving the master that you have, which is your customer and your big boss.
Yeah. Oh, I love that advice. It's so good.
I'm not really sure where all that came from because that's the first time I've ever said that.
I love it.
Luckily that's recorded. Make sure you send me that.
Well, Frank, I want to thank you for being on the corporate couch. I honestly, I could have continued another hour, so I might have to
I
have
know
you on.
we're like
have you on
super
again.
deep into this thing at this point, but yeah, you're
Uh,
right. Somewhere we got to call it.
You got it, yeah. But thank you so
friends
much.
are friends forever.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the corporate couch today. Appreciate it.
Hey, buddy, my pleasure, brother. Anytime.
Love talking to Frankie Russo. Frankie from New Jersey and New York. Hey, how you doing? But he's a good Louisiana boy. Spent a little time in Pittsburgh. But what a great person. And this story is just phenomenal. Got into the mortgage industry, running his own business and hiring friends. Made boatloads of money around, he was about 25-ish, 24. That started doing cocaine and, abusing alcohol, buying fast cars, and making a lot of money.
Wouldn't that make a good movie?
Yeah, that would be.
We could do that.
We could get Leonardo DiCaprio or
you think? Let's call him after
Robbie. Yeah,
let's call him after we
that
talk.
would be good. No, he's incredible. I mean, the things he's done. He started this ad agency. Early on. Right after. Yeah, he goes. Basically, overnight, I went from Russo Financial, his own company, to Potenza, which is power in Italian. It was an ad agency with his younger brother, I believe. Started that, started working with clients, a lot in the automotive industry. Gave us the meeting of a donkey barbecue, which
I love
basically
that donkey barbecue thing.
His automobile client basically brought him in because sales weren't what they supposed to be. So instead of blaming anyone internally, they blamed the ad agency.
Isn't that easier to do?
Yeah, that's what we did at Sprint.
Oh yeah.
Now T-Mobile, where in the early days, and we treated business partners, which we called vendors, not me, but others, and just skewered them.
Because it was never our fault. It was never any of our fault.
No. We had a high opinion of ourselves, even though we were the third largest and always competing with MCI and AT&T.
I always said that we were the fourth largest in a field of three.
We were the 7-Up to the Coke. And
that's
MCs.
exactly. We were the RC Cola, whatever.
But yeah, no, keynote speaking. I mean, love your weird. Well, and he gave the whole explanation of weird. And weird is, basically a negative connotation, but when it was spelled in the Old English, WYRD, it was meant your supernatural powers or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, here's another example of somebody that took an adjective and made it into a noun.
Right.
Which would be it's kind of like Steve Jobs and the think different,
right.
Where he took an adjective and made it into he took an adverb and made it into an adjective. So anyway.
Wow, I'm learning a lot here, Joe.
I tell you, I'm just full of it. You keep me stifled.
You sure
all
are.
the time.
You're full of it.
I'm full of it.
No, his TEDx talk on AI and the future of work, and his books and his keynote speaking, and his talk now is basically creating a culture where everybody's genius comes out, which he calls they're weird, in the Old English. So yeah, I just love his energy. One of the few guests that did the interview standing up, so that was cool too. What did you have?
He
was
amazing. The whole adjective noun thing, the whole donkey barbecue thing. I wrote that down. I thought that was hilarious. He talked about how to find a business idea. He said to be ahead of the game, and I wrote this down, is to find the gap, find out what other people are doing, and don't do what the top 20% are doing, but find the gap between the bottom of what they're doing and what people are actually wanting. It's actually just sort of an extension of find a need and fill it.
Yeah, no, I love that too. The other thing he did with that idea was he took it down to the small, medium-sized businesses,
right.
The SMBs acronym, because he goes, hey, if I can take what they're doing in SpaceX and take it down to help small and medium-sized businesses, I have a product, a service that I can help people with, because people are not going to focus on that market then in the beginning, and I think that's how got him the 12 to 24 months ahead of the curve.
But it also shows you that there's always some opportunity out there. You just have to look for it. You have to know where to look. You have to know which rock to look under, if you will. Another thing that I wrote down that he said was, if you are worried about AI taking your job, maybe you're in the wrong job, you know? And I think about that a lot, because I think about any time there's an opportunity for technology to take over your job, if anything, you should celebrate that. You certainly shouldn't fight against it. You shouldn't be doing that. For instance, if you are working in an assembly line and your job is to take a screw and screw it into a widget, and that's all you do all day long is take this screw, screw it into the widget, lay it down on the assembly line, and pick up another widget and screw something into it. And then the boss comes around and says, guess what? We've just bought a new robot, and that robot is going to screw that screw into the widget, and he's going to do it 5, 10, 20 times faster than you are. He's never going to miss it. He's never going to make a mistake. He's never going to take a day off. He's never going to take a sick day. He's always going to show up to work, and he can work 24/7 if you ask him to. And how can you fight that? You'd be tilting at windmills if you're trying to fight something like that. Go on and find something else, because maybe your job isn't to be screwing in that screw into the widget. So I think of that too as a former data scientist. I think, you know, we used to get a table of data that we would download from some marketing database or sales database or something like that. And we would write a program to analyze that. We'd do frequency distributions and chi-squares and significant differences and all that kind of stuff. But we were writing, at the end I was writing it in SAS, but in the beginning we were actually writing those programs in COBOL. If somebody comes along now that's 21 years old, fresh out of college, and says, oh, I'm just going to type in a little prompt into ChatGPT and say, tell me about this data. Unearth some significant findings in this data. And ChatGPT is going to come back with mountain loads of stuff, literally in seconds.
Right. Yeah.
Why would I complain about that? You know?
Yeah.
So that's where we are. Hang on to your seatbelts, people, because
the speed of change is unlike anything we've seen before in the world today. It's incredible. But one more, well, I could talk about Frankie all day long. The other thing, we're recording here in February 2025. In April of this year, he'll celebrate 17 years of sobriety. But you got to love a guy that is doing that, and in his daily journey of sobriety, and he owns Voodoo Growers, a cannabis company.
I love that.
But he can't do any of the QA of the product, so,
or even be a customer. But
right. Never tried my product, but that's a good thing.
But if they're doing a good job, let them. God bless them. Let them at it.
Oh my God, Joe, what advice or final thoughts about the episode?
The final thought I have is you would be interested in this. I went to a restaurant and I ordered a black coffee, and the waitress said, "What do you mean by black coffee?" And I said, "Well, I want a coffee without any cream or sugar." And she said, "Well, we're all out of cream, but I can make it without condensed milk if you like."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.